Hello, class. Mr. Graziano here. Sorry we haven't been able to do hardly anything since the pandemic here started because unfortunately we're not going to be able to finish up our clay projects or start on stained glass because you just don't have the supplies and materials at home to do that. So since the class is called Sculpture and Design, we're going to concentrate on the design part of the class because there's some things that you can do with that. Now, one of the things I was going to have you do was a final project and add as a final paper. So I'm going to introduce that now and explain what that all entails, okay? So I'm going to send this sheet of paper out to you, and it's called the Elements of Design Final Paper. And what I'm going to do is you're going to write a short paper, okay? Now, if you feel like, hey, I'd rather do a video demonstration, then you can do that instead, okay? Because it's going to require kind of the same amount of work and setup. So some people might think I'd rather do that than write the paper. Other people think I'd rather write the paper than do a video demonstration. So the video demonstration you would do on YouTube, and you would send that to me, okay? And then all of the paper, you're going to write the paper, and you'll send that to me. So you got a choice, one of the two. So I'm just going to go through what this all entails. You're going to write a paper on the elements of design, okay? And you're going to pick something that you think supports or shows all the elements of design, a good design. So write a short paper, at least 2 pages, about something that is a good design and or an ordered relationship. It can be in any one of these areas: painting, drawing, sculpture, product design, industrial design, packaging design, architectural, and so on. Okay? Or anything else that has a good design, and this is important, and you can prove it. Prove it by applying these elements of design: repetition, unity, balance, variety, emphasis, and then the final thing you're going to write about is areas of improvement. If this was your design, what might you do to that design to change it? Either take something away, add something, make something a different size or whatever to make the design better, okay? Now, I'll give you some examples of things you can write your paper on. For example, you could do packaging design. Here's some examples of packaging design. This glue bottle is an example of packaging design. It holds a liquid. Here's a Ritz box, example of packaging design. Here's a Cliff Bar, example of packaging design, okay? You could also do graphic design. Here's an ad that was for an iPod many years ago. It's a graphic design that was in a magazine. And I'll go through that. This is actually a really good design. It's a graphic design. You could do a sculpture design. For example, here I've got a big, huge, it's hard to see because it's a little bit close, but a big, huge chicken. Okay? And it's a sculpture, and it's a good design, and I could explain that. Here's some examples of things students have done. A person did the example on this spaceship that they had a picture of in a magazine. Here's interior design. Person did this room with the chairs and the table setting and the lamp and all the things that made this a good design. So that's interior design. Here's another example of packaging design. Okay. Here's an example of architectural design. Student did this about the old courthouse in West Bend. She took pictures of it and actually took pictures from more than one angle so she could explain her design a little bit better. Okay, so that's architectural design. Here's another example of graphic design. Okay, here's an example right now. A person did this on the castle from Disney World. And they talked about architectural design, how that was a good design. Here's another example of, this would be, well, part of a house, architectural design. Okay, so what you're going to do is this. First of all, repetition. The things that need to repeat in design are colors, lines, and shapes. Sometimes forms and textures and patterns, okay? So I'll give you an example. Let's go back to the Ritz box. I know I've showed you this before. You know, there's certain colors that are repeating. Obviously, there's red repeating throughout. There's this gold repeating everywhere, okay? And so we got colors that are repeating. And we got blue that's repeating in here. Okay, we got shapes that are repeating. Notice all the ovals and circles. Oval here and there, big circle in Ritz, oval in the letters, oval on this little guy's head down here. We've got also triangles that are repeating. There's a triangle up here, a large triangle right here, okay? So we've got colors, lines, shapes. Now lines, when you describe the lines, all the lines, a lot of curves, and then a lot of diagonals. Notice the diagonal lines in all these triangles. Notice even the letters are diagonal, the B and the I and the T, and the letters in the sandwich. And even the way these little crackers are sort of arranged diagonally, okay? Nothing's in really straight lines here. So that was the first element. So what I would do is in my paper, I would describe where these things are. I wouldn't just say, hey, it's got the color red. You describe where it is. It's got the color yellow. You describe where it is, okay? So in my paper, I've got colors, lines, and shapes for sure. Now, if you're doing something like architecture, okay, you might also talk about textures. Textures would be this shingle texture up here, the bricks, and so on, okay? Next, unity. Now, this one's a little tricky. Repetition creates unity. What seems to be the dominant repeating factor that holds it all together? Also be able to defend that argument against counterclaims. So if I was talking about this Ritz package, somebody might say, well, it's ovals. Someone else might say it's triangles. This is my claim. I think it's diagonal lines. You notice there's just diagonals everywhere. The letters are diagonal. The crackers are diagonal. The triangles are diagonal. This whole thing is dominated by diagonals. That, I think, is the overall dominant repeating factor. If I was talking about this design here, it's a little bit hard to see, but you're talking about this curvy, irregular line, the shape of her arm, and that line here in the iPod, and her hair up here, and her bikini top, and here her fingers. Everything's got this actually natural sort of curve to it everywhere, okay? You also could say the dominant repeating factor would be the black and the gold. So it's got two things that are dominantly repeating. The curvy lines and the black and the gold. Dominant, okay? So next, so we've talked about repetition, unity, balance. Now balance, remember there's two types of balance, the symmetrical and asymmetrical. Symmetrical basically means if you divide it down the middle, it's exactly the same on both sides. So for example, here's an example of a symmetrical design. If I divide this building down the middle, it's pretty much the same on both sides, okay? Whereas if I divide the Ritz cracker box down the middle, it's not the same on both sides, but it's balanced because things are evenly distributed. We've got golds here and all around. We've got red all around. We've got a little blue here, a little blue there, a little blue there. We've got white here. I'm seeing a little white ridge here. I'd like to see a little more white down there, maybe a little bit of white in here. So we've got ovals that are balanced. We've got triangles that are balanced. We've got colors that are balanced, okay? So balance means there's some even distribution of things in your design, okay? Next is variety. Variety just means what aspect design is different to make it less monotonous and more interesting. But remember, too much variety may destroy its unity, and not enough variety makes it boring. So for example, just now, when it comes to packaging design, sometimes people think if it's packaging design, it must be good. So for example, here's an example of packaging design that I don't think is that good. Now you might say, well, there's green here and there's green there and there's green there, but then there's also red, and we've got this circle, and we've got red here and black there and black. We got a lot of things going on. There's almost too much variety. Here's another example of packaging design. Too much variety, okay? Look at this. It's got the cartoonish characters, the big bold letters, this furry realistic hand, and then the realistic cereal, and then this other thing with tons of colors in it. So we got purples and oranges and yellows and reds and greens and blues and whites and blacks. Too much variety. This would be an example of there's too much variety. It's not a good design, okay? So let's go back to the paper. Next is emphasis. Emphasis, basically, it's the center of interest. What is the center of interest or focal point? What stands out or draws your attention because it is different in either size, shape, or color, or any combination of those? Remember, the center of interest can be small like a flower or large like a tower, okay? So for example, this center of interest in the Ritz box, to me, it's pretty easy to pick out. It's the large navy blue circle. First of all, it's bigger than everything else. It's the only navy blue, and it's a perfectly large, huge circle. Very obvious center of interest, okay? The center of interest in here, in this advertisement, okay? I think it is the iPod. The iPod is the only thing that's white. It's the only thing that's straight up and down and basically geometric and rectangular here, whereas everything else is very curvy. So it's small like a flower. It's not dominating like the Ritz was, okay? Large like a tower. Center of interest here. It's the tower. That tower is gigantic, stands out. It really, is emphasized my center of interest, okay? Now, last thing is this. What areas of improvement could there be? Now, every one of these designs has something that they could improve on. For example, let's go back to the Ritz box. I've used this before. People have said, well, we got all these crackers over here, but there's nothing over here. I'd like to see maybe just 1 or 2 crackers to balance this out. Or some people said, what's with this guy? He's multicolored. I don't know what he has to do with anything else on here. I think I'd get rid of him. Last, you might say there's a lot of white right here. Let's have a little more white down in this area, because right now the white is very dominant up here. Okay? Talked about center of interest before. Back to bad center of interest. Okay, now this one, I don't know if it's Rice Krispies, because that's huge, or this big green hand, or these little snap, crackle, and pop characters on this box. What's the center of interest? There's a competing center of interest. I wouldn't use this, okay? Now, like I said, not all designs are good. Here's an example of packaging design. To me, pretty boring, okay? We get this brownish red color. We get a chunk of red, a big thing of green, and a big thing of blue. First of all, none of those repeat anywhere. And it's rather boring with a large empty area down here. So I think this design, not a good example of a good design. Okay? So this is what you're going to do. You're going to write your paper. It should be clear and concise. In other words, easy to understand. It should be written as though you're writing it to somebody who knows nothing about design and you're teaching them. A paragraph devoted to each of the 5 elements would be about sufficient, but I would say the biggest paragraph is going to be for repetition, because you need to describe what colors repeat, what lines repeat, what shapes repeat, possibly what textures and patterns repeat, okay? So that would be your largest paragraph. So I'd say a paragraph devoted to each one of these and a paragraph devoted to the areas of improvement. Start with a summary that describes what goes into an element of design. What are the 5 aspects of an element design? And then end with a summary of what you're doing. So that's going to take about 2 pages. If you hand me a paper that's a page or less, I'm not even going to read it. I'm just going to give you an F. Okay? So write a paper. Now, you can also do a video demonstration. And I'll show you another video where I'll explain that. Okay? So in the meantime, I'm going to be sending you this paper. And what I want you to do by this Friday is I want you to find your subject. What's your subject going to be? Okay? Is it going to be packaging design? Is it going to be architectural design? Okay? Is it going to be product design? Is it going to be here's a great example of a t-shirt design. This is a really nice design, and it's done on a t-shirt, so this would be an example of graphic design, okay? It could be an actual object that you have. Like, for example, I have this sculpture, or I've got this glue bottle. It's an actual object. So you're going to take a picture of that thing or find the picture on the internet and load it into Google Slides, and it's due this Friday what your subject is. Your paper's not due this Friday, and your demonstration's not due this Friday, but I want your subject into that Google Slides. You guys understand that, okay? So I'm going to send you to that paper soon, and your instructions, you can get started on this. And then I'm looking forward to reading your papers and seeing your video demonstrations. Okay, take care.